Hey, it's Ashley.
And Patty, and we are your co-hosts for the Phoenix Forte podcast. Join us to connect to healing and joy after divorce by chatting with phenomenal guests, fearlessly confronting hot topics, and feeling the spirit with our mic drop moments.
So jump into the flames, rise from the ashes, and be strong and loud as you hang out with us here at Phoenix Forte.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am so excited to sit down yet again and record another episode and for a part 2 of what we had done before. So I am just excited to keep talking about boundaries. How about you, Ashley? You worn out on boundaries? Or you still all
Never. I'm just so thrilled with how many questions about boundaries that we got in, and we'll take as much time as we need to. So yeah, let's go.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I guess we're just going to jump right in with more of these listener questions. Okay. So, okay, this is one that we got. Okay, there are so many resources out there when it comes to boundaries. Like, for example, Ashley, your class, there is Vicki Tidwell Palmer, I know is a big person that's out there, Dr. Clouden Townsend. There's just like all these different ways of people explaining or how to do boundaries. So I guess the question is, because there are just an overwhelming amount of resources out there, how do you navigate finding which one is maybe going to work for you?
I'll give my thoughts, and then Patty, you give me your thoughts. What was helpful for you figuring out boundaries as well?
Okay.
My first thought is come take my class, and then I can help you with your exact scenario. My second thought is simply what helped me. For me, the best thing I ever did was read the book Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud, because it is Christian based and it presents principles. And I remember learning that God was a God of boundaries and it blowing my mind. And it shifted everything, my understanding of boundaries, what I thought they were. And all of that happened while I was reading that particular book. So for me and my story, that's the book to go to. That's the one that I always recommend first, simply because I've seen how transformative it can be. But what are your thoughts? What worked for you?
I believe in the What Can I Do About Me book. I believe they give those instructions. And then, so I read through that. And then I also went through the Vicki Tidwell Palmer, whatever. And there was an instance where her specific formula, I was so glad I was learning about it at that time because it was exactly what I needed at that time.
She has like a 5-step formula for identifying and doing boundaries. Yeah.
Yes, and I was in a place, and I'm trying to touch on this, that I needed to ask a person to leave the premises where I was living, and that person was refusing to do so. So I followed her process like exactly the way she told me to do it. And as I went back and presented the boundary, went back and presented the boundary, and then I finally went and I had to make a new boundary, basically. And that new boundary then was, you have a choice to leave this home, which is what I'm asking you to do. If you will not leave this home, I will call the police. That was it. And I presented it just like that. I will call the police.
Sounds so simple right now, but you put so much work into figuring that out, right?
Yes. And in the moment I went like from the bedroom door to back to the couch where my notebook was, where all my vegetable notes. I'm like, okay, check. And I went back to the door and I came back and sat down. I'm like, okay, check. Okay, now I went back to the door. And it really did. It did play out beautifully. And now obviously no guarantee that process will work for anybody else. But for me, it did. And it worked. And it got me safety and it got me safe quickly. Yeah. And so, so it was something that was really helpful. And then Clouden Townsend is another one. My mom teaches that to her whole recovery program. It's like one of the best I know about boundaries. And so I guess when it comes to me trying to navigate which was best for me, it was really just reading some and trying it that way. And if that really was not making sense for me, I think the mistake that I made was trying to do it that way, even though it wasn't.
Yeah.
So just deciding, okay, I'm gonna learn it this way. Okay, I'm gonna try this. If it's not serving you, it's not working for you, throw it away. And then try something else.
What a beautiful boundary.
Yes, that's something that will actually work and does click. Yes. I think that's probably what my thoughts are in navigating all the different resources.
Yeah, I like that.
If there is somebody who is in your life that is a very good example, like you're like, that person has boundaries and man, do they not set them? That would probably be one of my first places to go now, looking back, is to go to that person and say, hey, how did you
Let's
learn
do
how
this.
to do boundaries?
Yeah.
And starting there, starting at where they started, because they're already somebody I'm already associating that.
Yeah.
I really want to do that. So
That's
I don't
such
know.
good advice to
Okay.
acknowledge where you see good or where you see healthy, and then
Yeah.
ask, hey, how did you learn the tools that you know?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Okay. Okay. That was a good one. That was a fun one. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. How to recognize if someone is setting a boundary, if they don't actually, they're not actually using the words like, this is my boundary. And they're going on, and like, how do you know? Like, oh, is there like a trigger or anything to know, like, oh, that was a boundary? And okay, how do I go about respecting that now? Like, how do we get ourselves checked into that mindset as soon as we hear that boundary almost?
Practice. I think it takes a lot of practice. I will often teach that boundaries can be communicated with words or with actions or both. And
Okay.
so, as we're watching for boundaries around us, we're watching for words like no. We're watching for words like, I'm not comfortable with that, or I would prefer this, or is it possible you could? We're watching for um, requests being made for change. And then we're kind of noticing our reaction to them. If we're used to being around people who don't have boundaries, then their request or their shift for a boundary is going to feel a little different. And we have to pause and evaluate, is this a healthy boundary? Is this not a boundary? Is this a demand? Like we have to kind of navigate that whole thing. But those words, no, I think is usually the biggest one, or an iteration of no, I can't, or I won't, or I not right now, or not today, or I'm not feel like those kinds of things, just honoring those. And then watching for actions that also communicate the no's or the I'm okay withs or the so we get to know who that person is. And I think I'm going to end up just being a broken record. It really comes down to getting to know yourself again, because as you get to know yourself and what boundaries look and feel like, you'll begin to recognize what boundaries look and feel like.
Yes, from others. Yes. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, when you went into describing that, I don't know, like I got this image of like a grocery store and how like there are all these sort of like verbal and nonverbal boundaries in place, right? Like they have like the little chain or whatever over like the register that's closed. That's a boundary. They're telling you you
Mm-hmm.
cannot check out here. Like it's not possible to do that here. Or a security guard at the grocery store is like standing in front of one door. It's simply saying like he doesn't have to say a word. Him standing there in front of that door is communicating the boundary of that door is not to be used. Like that door can't be used for some
Yeah.
reason. He is standing in front of it, and that communicates to me that's a boundary. I'm not gonna respect that, whatever, or whatever it may be. But yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, that's just like what played in my head of these different things of like, even in somebody without them saying anything,
Yeah.
that they can be communicating boundaries just by their, like the a movement of somebody taking a step back from someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's a boundary. They're needing space, so they're taking a step back. That's an action step they're taking to communicate, I need space. Like I'm going to
Yeah.
step back, yes, or whatever it may be. So
And
okay.
as we tune into that, as we practice those skills, like a child is going to run under that chain at the grocery store thing all the time. They don't know what it means. They don't know what it's requesting of them. Someone might teach them. Parent might say, hey, this chain actually means that we don't cross that. So you might have, like you were saying before, a friend or a mentor or someone that can help you start to recognize them in your own life. Or it might come from experience. Pretty soon that kid's going to recognize, when I cross this thing, nobody actually helped me purchase anything over here. In order to buy this, I need to go over there. And so you might be navigating boundaries and feel like you're the first one in generations to figure out what boundaries are, and you're the trailblazer for your friends. And so you will learn and see them as you begin to watch for them and feel them in yourself.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so now, okay, what do you do? Like how do we best navigate if we just really, really hate someone's boundaries, or somebody really hates ours? What does that mean then for us? Yeah. So what does it mean if we were to hate
Oh,
somebody else's, and then what does it mean if they were to hate ours?
I'm going to start with, what does it mean if they are to hate ours?
Okay.
Um, because my boundaries are saying what I am in control of, part of my boundary can include letting go of other people's opinions. Right. And so if I've checked, I know what my value system is, I know what my needs are, I know that this boundary is honoring both of those, and I'm not stepping outside of my values in doing this, then it really doesn't matter if somebody else hates this boundary. I am going to stay firm. I'm going to stay strong, and I'm going to just say to myself, no, I'm allowed to do this. I have a right to do this. And in fact, one of my favorite tools is called the Personal Bill of Rights. And it's a document that I suggest be formally written out, just reminding myself, what are some of the rights that I have, so that I have a stronghold. One example of this is in my personal Bill of Rights. It says, I have a right to deny access to my home to those who cannot keep safety. And initially, if I were to not invite someone in my home because I wasn't entirely sure, I would feel guilty about it. I would feel uncomfortable with it. But then I ran into someone whose parents have experience in the legal system and experience in the, what's what I'm looking for? Maybe just the legal system, criminal justice type thing. And
Justice?
yeah,
Okay.
when I told them I was feeling guilty for not letting like this person come into my house, they were like, are you kidding me? Never let anyone enter your premises. They were completely comfortable with the idea. Police officers, child services, some random utility person, don't let them in your house without seeing credentials, without asking for reasons, without seeing what they can leave behind so you can contact them later. Like there are all of these things that they expect someone to present before they're about to enter their home, and they were perfectly comfortable with it. And so I was uncomfortable with it because I hadn't had the experience of saying, no, I have a right for this. So my personal Bill of Rights gave me a thing that would remind me, I have a right to deny access to my home. It is okay for me to not let people in.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. So does that also go along the lines of like if they hate our boundaries, kind of like, I don't know. I think this is what helped me. Maybe that's how I should say this. And you can tell me if like maybe it doesn't apply. Okay. So what helped me when I knew I was going to set a boundary that I knew without a shadow of a doubt the other person was going to hate and was going to like there would be an upheaval of like setting this boundary, even
Those
with
are
no
scary ones.
simply added. I knew it was going to do that. And what comforted me, I guess, in those situations was what they think is none of my business. What they think is none of my business. So even if they throw all their thoughts at me, that's fine. I just let those thoughts go in this ear, not the other, because technically those thoughts are none of my business. They're none of my business. Anything doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to keep doing what I know is supposed to be right, and I'm going to keep within my value system and just keep moving forward in that. You know what they think is. And I love that too. I would have loved to have that. No, I have a right to this. I have a right to this. I'm going to stay. I have a right to this. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The none of my business, I think, is beautiful. That's what was one of my personal mantras. In my Bill of Rights, I ended up adding a line, I have a right to be the villain in someone's story and know that it's not true. That I don't actually have to control or worry about that story. Me holding my boundary, they can hate it.
Yes, they can
That's
hate me
okay.
for it.
They can
Yes.
hate me for it.
Okay.
They can tell everyone else to hate me for it. But actually, what matters here is me standing strong in my values and knowing who I am and
Mhm.
and repeating that over and over. I have a right. It's okay. I have a right. It's okay. I'm not doing anything wrong. It's okay.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So now what do we do if we just really hate someone else's boundary? It's like, man, but I really want them to do this one thing. And we have this boundary though, but then it's like, oh, I hate that boundary. Okay. So how do we like obviously I know like we shouldn't doesn't give us a right to go and disrespect their boundary or anything like that. You know, boundaries are to be respected. I definitely understand that. So yeah, it's like how do we I guess provide grace for ourselves and where we're at in that hating of that boundary, but also in respecting the boundary still, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll talk me. When I have the strongest reaction to someone's boundary, it's because them not having a boundary there was actually serving me pretty well. So when they put in this boundary, I've taken a bit of a hit. Not I don't want to confuse that with like abuse because
Yes. Right.
that's
Yes.
not what we're talking about, but a hit of, oh, dang it, let me use for example, if I have a friend and she is willing to watch my children, and so she watches my children and then watches them and then watches them and then watches them, and then pretty soon she says, "I'm so sorry, Ashley, but I can't watch them anymore. My life has shifted and this is no longer a thing I can do." Her putting in that boundary affects me. And
Yeah.
that's really hard. And I
Yeah.
might fight against that. What are you? You're fine. You can watch them.
Please.
But I hold on to my own mantra of a healthy individual acknowledges and honors their own limits and acknowledge and honors the limits of others. And so
Okay.
my value is to show up as healthy as I can. And
Right.
so in this moment, if I'm going to show up as a healthy individual, I need to acknowledge and honor the limits of others. Even if it's not my favorite, even if it has affected me in some way, even if it's going to make my life a little bit harder because now I need to go find new tools or new resources or a new way to get something done that was previously being served by them. It might affect me a little bit, but I'm choosing to show up as a healthy person. So I'm going to acknowledge and honor their limit and take control of what I can control.
Yes, yes, I love that. And when you said that, I'm like, okay, what's an example of my life that I could give that? Okay, like I can even think about recently where, like, and here I am. My mom, like, you could tell, I'm sure that she had like a super long day. And my mom, for those people who don't know, she runs a nonprofit and she works really hard. She does a lot of good. She works really hard, all things. Anyways, I could already get a sense maybe that she was feeling tired and a little worn out or whatever. And I had had a very long day and a very, emotionally heavy day, and all I really wanted to do was play cards with somebody. So when I came home, I asked Mom, hey, do you want to come upstairs and play cards? And her response to me was, I really just need to sit here for a minute and just kind of not think for a little bit, and then I can come up there and I can play cards. And of course, my initial was like, oh man, okay. But also I had to acknowledge that, like, just like you're saying, she has limits too. And
Yeah.
so for me to expect that, like, she should just pick herself up by the bootstraps of her long day and play cards with me because I had a long day, oh, that just doesn't seem very fair. That doesn't seem very
Yeah.
right. That steps outside of my personal value system. And so, just like you said, I had to acknowledge that she had a really long day too. She has needs also. And she was so gracious. She didn't even use the word no. She would tell me, no, I will not play cards with you. She said, I need some time
Yeah.
and then I can do that. And so, like, she communicated her boundary beautifully. And of course, whether I liked it or not, it really did not necessarily, that wasn't really up for debate. Up for debate.
Debate. Yeah.
The boundary or not, it was, this is the boundary, and I chose it. I would definitely respect that. I love her. I care for her. Of course, I'm going to respect that
And
boundary.
sometimes we have to purposely choose that, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's not our knee jerk reaction. Sometimes we really don't want to. I de-stress playing games. So as you were talking about that, I had a stressful day and I asked someone to play a game with me and their answer was just no. They said, "No, I'm going to go read." And I'm sitting here going, "Oh, but I need to distress." And I de-stress by playing games. And so I really need, and it was really hard. My knee jerk was not, "Oh, okay, good for you." My knee jerk was, crap, like, I don't know what else to do, right? It was really, really, really hard. And so sometimes, often, most times, we have to purposely choose how we're going to behave based on our value system, not based on our emotions.
Yes, okay, I love that. And actually, I'm going to add one thing to that because of what you just said, going off of our emotions. Something that I go to this recovery service every week, and something that we say a lot is recovery is no longer allowing what we feel dictate what we do.
Yes.
We're letting our feelings control us. We are in control of our
Like
emotions.
that.
And so, anyways, that just as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, I'm
That's so
familiar.
much.
I'm definitely familiar with that concept. Yes, we will not
Yes.
let our feelings dictate what we do. Yes.
Yeah. Our
So, yeah.
feelings are important. I had to acknowledge that this was really hard and now I was stressed. And so I have to talk to it and be like, "Okay, stressed, why are you here?" "Oh, because our usual way of handling you just said no. So what are we going to do now?" Like I have to acknowledge and honor my emotion, but it does not get to decide my behavior.
Right. Yeah, I can't take out that emotion on another person.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. That was a great question. I'm really glad that we got to really play through that one because I
Yeah.
really, it's really helpful. That's a really good one. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Oh, this is something that this question came from me. because I this is something that has been such a gift to me, and so I cannot imagine not asking you for it so that I can gift it to others. Could you even just give me even just one? If you want to give me three, that'd be great too, but just whatever you feel comfortable with doing of examples that the Savior of boundaries that Jesus had,
Sure.
or even any boundary that is set in the scripture
Yeah.
that like one person made to another or whatever. Where it's like,
Boundaries are all through the scriptures. God is a God of boundaries. Having boundaries is a godlike quality. And that's the thing that really like changed my world, right? Is recognizing this. My favorite boundary of Christ, we see lots of them. My favorite one of his, now I'm feeling bad. It's not favorite. I have lots of them. Okay. This particular one. He's just watched his best friend and cousin be beheaded. So John the Baptist has just been beheaded, which that's a rough day. Like, that's pretty hard. And he needs some time by himself. So he walks away. He goes out to the middle of nowhere and everyone follows him. So he's got 5,000 people who follow him and they follow him to the middle of nowhere. He's trying to be alone. And they're like, okay, we're here and we're hungry. So solve this
hey,
problem for us. um,
so
my limit, yeah, my limit would have happened way before this because he is the savior and has larger limits than he had capacity to feed the 5,000. And we see this incredible miracle that he worked while he's going through his own grieving and was actually just looking for some alone time. And then he gets everyone filled spiritually and physically and goes, okay. And he turns to his apostles and says, send these people away. Like, send them away now. And also go get on a boat and go away. I just need some alone time. And watching him set this example of it's okay to prioritize and set this boundary of I have to commune with my Father right now because I'm going through something hard, right? So he sends the multitudes away. The apostles get on the boat, and he goes to pray. And while he's praying, this giant storm rolls in onto the Sea of Galilee, I think is where the boat was at. And now the apostles are in this huge storm and they're afraid and it's chaos. And the Savior does not come get them. He stays and he prays and he says no. That even the Savior in his service, his was greater than mine. He fed the 5,000, but in this moment, he doesn't go get them. This is where we learn that he's the fourth watch God or whatever. But he stays and communes and gets what he needs so that he even has capacity. And then once he has capacity, he'll jump back in and he's right there. But first he takes care of himself. He says no. He asks he sends people away. I can't do this right now. I need some time for me.
Yes, I'm so glad that's the example you chose because it is my favorite one. Is like the one that I like, no, I know Jesus set boundaries because I know that there was like a whole shore full of people that were still wanting him. He was like, listen, y'all, I'm gonna rest now. I'm gonna
It's
get on
time to
this.
go away. Yeah.
Like, I gotta go. And even though he is Jesus, we're not talking about like Joe Schmo, whoever, we're talking about Jesus here, like that has such a bigger impact on it that it's like this was Jesus, the savior of the world, looking at all these people who apparently have all these needs and whatever else, but him being like, and none of us are the savior,
Yeah.
So we definitely have a right to
Yeah.
set a boundary of any kind, but especially a boundary of I am going to take a rest now.
Yeah. I've reached my capacity.
Who's
I can't
yelling?
do this.
Yes. Who's demanding that I do this or that? I'm gonna take some time.
Yeah. And then once his capacity was there, then he comes and I'm pretty sure he walks on water next. I think that's the next part of the story is he comes and walks on water and saves them from the storm. But before he does that, he just makes sure that he's okay. Goes through his grieving, goes through his sorrow, I assume, communes with the Father, fills up his own capacity, and then he's like, okay. But even the apostles going through a storm was not more important than him making sure that he was okay.
Yes, yes. Okay, I love that. Anytime you ever want to plug in during any episode of any kind, a boundary that Jesus set, please just share it with all of us.
They are all over the place.
I'm welcoming all the things about any sort of Jesus boundary of any kind. I love those so much. And especially the way that you relate them to the scriptures. It's such a gift, such a gift. Okay. Okay, I'm wondering if we can kind of talk about when do we get to the part where we get to like punish and like control people, but with boundaries? Don't we get to do that?
That's what boundaries are, right? They're just punishments and control of other people. It's interesting. I did this podcast series with a Q&A at the end of it, and I had someone come to the Q&A purely because they always thought that boundaries were about controlling and punishing, and that didn't follow her value system. And so she was going to come to this to see if maybe there was something more to it. So I love that this question came in because it's such a prevalent misunderstanding of what boundaries are. So the answer to the question is we don't.
Okay. Thank you for
Boundaries
giving
are
us the
about
truth and reality.
yeah. Boundaries are about what am I doing? How am I responding? What am I in control of? And the answer to that question is never other people. We're commanded to have self-control. We've never been commanded to have other control. So,
right. Okay. So the answer to that is we don't get to that. There is no part of Okay, so I am wondering if I want to present to you a boundary. Actually, this was actually a huge, one of the biggest boundaries that like made a huge difference for me in my life. And I just want to read it to you how it was written originally and see if we can't break it down to see if anyways, yeah, we'll go from there. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I decide when and what to tell my family and friends about my experience. Do not ask me to lie for you or about our situation because I will no longer do that. Now, this was like a rough draft of a boundaries homework I had made like in the very beginning of all my experience. So, can you kind of walk me through that? Was that an appropriate boundary? Is there any part of that that was appropriate, inappropriate? Like any kind of like, can you just kind of walk me through that?
I love that you were able to find your example of as you were going through and figuring out boundaries. I think it's fantastic. Okay. What's the first line of it again? Will you read it for me?
I decide when and what to tell my family and friends about my experience.
Beautiful. I love this one so much. It's based in this need for connection to other people. It's based in a truth of that this is my experience. Sometimes, especially in part one, we talked about Rescuers Anonymous, especially if you're a rescuer who's like, oh, but if I share my story, it might make him feel bad or it might make her defensive or something. I love that this is founded in the truth of no, my story is mine and it is okay for me to speak on it. So we have this beautiful example of truth based in a need, and it's just clear and concise. You can remember it. Read that second line for me.
Okay. Do not ask me to lie for you or about our situation because I will no longer do that.
That last part about I will no longer do that tells me that you were being asked to lie for him, to present falsehoods, or to cover for the things. I think this is a common thing in relationships that are dealing with some sort of abusive or addicting tendencies in there, just covering up for those things, right? So I love that clear. I will no longer do that. But that first part that says, "Do not
Yes.
approach me with these requests," seem like they're outside the fence a little bit
Right.
because
That
it's
seems like my need of controlling, right?
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
control. That's a using boundary to control. Okay, so let me try it again. Okay, now that we've kind of walked through that. Okay. I decide when and what to tell my family and friends about my experience. I will no longer lie for you or about this situation.
Look how much more power that has,
Yes.
right? When we
Yes.
take out the piece about I'm going to control your behavior because we can't control anyone's behavior from the very beginning of their life. So he's
Only we
going to
could, but we
most likely,
cannot.
yeah, he's he's going to most likely approach you and ask for a lie again. But the power comes from not giving him the control over what you're doing because you can't control him. Instead, saying, I'm not going to do that. I will no longer do this. All of that control and all of that power comes back into that boundary as soon as we take it out of the let me tell you what to do and into the here's how I'm going to behave.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more example. Okay. So, and I think that this is going to be an example that I used to punish. Like if I had set the boundary this way, I think it would have been an abuse to punish. Okay. So I just don't, I mean, let's just be real. I didn't feel that the communication that was happening was a safe communication. I also, at this time that everything was ending, it did not seem reasonably healthy for me to try to leave like some big open line of communication between the two of us that did not seem to be aligning with my value system, right? Okay, to do that. So I would imagine if I had presented that boundary as, you're a jerk, you do not communicate with me in a way that I deserve to be communicated, so don't talk to me anymore. If you need to get a hold of me, sorry. Like, I would imagine that that is a way of like punishing somebody. Like, well, since you're a jerk, I'll show you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's full of my emotions are taking control instead
Yeah.
of basing my behaviors off of my value system. My emotions have it. And you know what? Here's some name calling and here's some punishment to try to teach you that this wasn't okay. And as we're saying it right now, it's almost a little flippant, like, why would anyone ever do this? But
Yeah.
really, our knee-jerk reaction when we're being treated poorly is to defend ourselves. That's what we do. We're going to defend ourselves. And so if we've got someone, in your case, verbally attacking you in all of these ways, coming back to defend yourself and to attempt to prove that it shouldn't be happening is a totally natural, normal response, built in with some fight, flight, or freeze survival mode cues in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to create a healthy boundary that's actually going to be solid in truths, in values, and honoring yourself, it's got to not have all of that in there. So if we were to try to rewrite that and come up with a healthy way to present that boundary, what do you think that would look like?
Okay, I believe that would look like I see, I do not feel safe communicating with you the way that we have. In order to communicate with me in the future, I have set up a middleman. I understand there could be a need for communication, and I want to make sure that there is availability for you to do that. So, in order to do that, I need you to reach out to my middleman, and he will get me the message, and I'll be sure a message comes back to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
This is not a safe thing for me, but I recognize
Mhm.
there's going to be times when we have to talk, right? Like, here's the reality of the situation. Communication has to happen. So I will only be
Right.
responding in this way anymore. And whether it's a middleman or email only, just some way to like shift that, but in a healthy, here's the thing, this hasn't been safe for me. So I'm no longer open to that. It's off. I won't
Right.
be
Yeah.
responding. If you need a response from me, you're welcome to come from this direction.
Right. Okay. Okay. So yeah, not even in and of itself, I feel like gives me clarity to know, okay, what is it that I am needing here?
Yeah.
Where does this boundary need to be? Okay. And then how do I communicate that? And it keeps
Yeah.
me, I feel like very much so in those lines and within my rights, going on with the Bill of Rights thing,
Mhm.
to set up a middleman and
Yeah.
to have safe communication with another person. I, as a human of value and worth, I deserve to have safe communication, right? We all do. So if I need to set up a middleman in order to do that, then I had a right to do so. So I think
Yeah.
that like power of being able to set that boundary is what it, that's kind of what it teaches me, I guess. I don't know
And
if
then
that
I
makes
think the
any
trick
sense.
on that is really following through on it because you won't be able to
Yes.
stop him from calling or texting.
Right. Right.
So if we have to communicate boundaries verbally, we keep them just succinct, nice and short, one or two lines, and then we have to
Right.
honor that. So when the phone call does come, you do not answer. When the text message does come, you do not respond. When it comes through a middleman, you immediately do. So it's just I live within my value system that I've set up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's pretty much wraps up actually our questions. And so I feel like for me, really the one other thing I did want to highlight in this part two is that is just kind of like if there was any boundaries that really stuck out for you that you wanted to share that like were really like you didn't really know you had a right to make that kind of a boundary. Like for example, for me, I didn't know that boundary of the example the first one we went over of like I decide when and what to tell my family. I didn't even know I was allowed to do that. So when I learned I could make a boundary where I was able to within my value system share my story and my experience, it was like empowerment all the way. I was like, wait, what? Wait. I can be honest. I'm allowed to be honest. Okay. Wow. And then also when it came to I I needed to put up a boundary when I was being asked to do something at church, like to take on a church calling, and I just really did not have the capacity at that time, physically or emotionally, in order to take on a calling. And even though it felt so uncomfortable, like I had no idea I could set a boundary with like a pastor or like a bishop or something. Like I didn't know like you could set boundaries with those people too, you know? So I think those were really boundary game changers for me, was just realizing like, wow, I have the right to take up space and to set boundaries with all people, I guess.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you had any moments for you through everything you went through that like really changed anything.
I just love that last sentence. I have a right to take up space. Yes. Bill of Rights. In future episodes, we're going to focus a whole thing on Bill of Rights. So if you've heard that and are wondering what a Bill of Rights is, stay tuned because we'll talk about it.
Yes.
But the thing that really made a difference for me, I had two that I was thinking about while you were talking, and now they've flitted away. Give me just a second.
Take your time.
Oh, we're inclusion boundaries. We're recognizing that if I wanted to feel more peaceful, then I needed to purposely bring in more peaceful things. If I wanted to have more of a capacity to love, then I needed to bring more things into my life that brought me love. Recognizing that my experience I was in control of. And not to the extent of I could stop hard things from happening, but to the extent that
Right.
I can be aware of those things that bring me those enjoyable to experience emotions and purposely include those in my life. Purposely ensure that I'm doing things that I know are enjoyable. And especially if you're coming out of a trauma where your brain is going through all sorts of chemicals, sometimes we won't recognize that this thing that was enjoyable for us is still enjoyable. Sometimes it's a little dampened, right? But if we know that that's something that's enjoyable for us, we've experienced before, purposely putting it back into our life will bring back a little bit of those chemicals. The first time won't be enough to notice because we're still in trauma. The second time won't be enough to notice. But as I purposely instill that back into my life, it's going to bring back that same thing that I used to experience with it. So my example is theater. I was a theater major. My associate's degree is in theater. I taught theater education for a long time. I participate in shows whenever I can, but going through trauma, it seems so superfluous. Like, why? This is just an extra thing, right? And it's going to be time away from my kids, and I'm probably would have to go alone, and so it just seemed extra. And so the first boundary that started making something huge in my life happen was, oh, I know that I love theater. So where can I go to get some theater? And probably, well, I'm trying to think how long it was into the process. 6 months maybe into separating a huge trauma happening before I bought myself season tickets to go to a theater. So then once a month, I was going to go see a play. And the first time it was horrible. I just kind of bawled because here I am alone and I thought this was going to be good. And the second time wasn't so bad. And then the third time, I finally found myself like smiling a little bit that I had purposely included something in my life that could bring that back to me and then
Yeah.
continued to include it there even when it was hard.
Wow, and I bet that really provided such a testimony too of like that boundaries really do work
Yeah.
and it works when you work them. And yeah, it's just wow. Wow, yeah, that's really, really cool. Okay, and I also want to give a plug too that if people are wondering if you want to send in any listener questions that pertain for boundaries specifically for divorce, like boundaries around specifically divorce, please send them in and we will definitely do a part three.
That's our
And
part 3 plan.
yes, all boundaries divorce for sure. Co-parenting, all the things. So please send us your questions because we would love to get to answer them for you for sure. For to the best of
Yes.
our ability. If we don't have answers, well, hopefully you can provide some resources or we can provide ways so you can find answers. Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yep. I'm so excited for part 3. So send us those questions and we'll keep answering them.
Yes, this was so great. Thank you, Ashley, for being willing to share all of your knowledge with us and for allowing me the space to share any insights that I may have had in this topic. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. This has been a good episode. I'm excited to get it out. I'm excited about these questions and I just think it's really good.
Yeah.
So Phoenix Forte listeners, remember you are not crazy and you're not alone.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We would love to hear from you. Please connect with us on social media at Phoenix Forte Pod, POD. Feel free to send us any questions or comments on Instagram.